Right, this morning this is what we're going to be riding. It's my 1950 ARIEL Square 4 Mark 1. We'll get her for a ride on it. I'll see if I can tell you a few little bits and pieces about it. So right then, let's be away. Right, we're away now. We'll see how we get on. Nice and steady with her while she gets warmed up. I'll try and explain to you as we get going about the cylinder head issues with these engines. The Mark 1 wasn't made for a right long time, and it had terrible trouble with the cylinder head. You couldn't keep a cylinder head gasket on it. They had a lot of trouble with them pulling the studs out of the aluminium. ARIEL, I believe, went up 3 times. I believe they went from 1/4, 5/16 and then up to 3/8 studs to try and alleviate the problem of it pulling the studs out of the aluminium. I spoke to a fella called Bruce Longsman. He's the spares fella for the ARIEL Owners Club, and he advised me on a couple of things to try. So off his advice I fitted 303 stainless studs instead of the R-grade steel studs. Now somebody come up with it that 303 stainless has got 80% of the expansion rate of the aluminium. So you can. I really should start this explanation again. If you torque the cylinder heads up and you tighten them too tight, as soon as the cylinder head expands, it pulls the studs out of the block if you have them over tight. Because R-grade steel does not expand at the same rate as the aluminium. So if you torque them at £20 when it's cold, the torque will be through the roof when it were hot because of the expansion. Anyway, what I did was fitted stainless steel studs, stainless steel nuts. I'm not sure does the nuts make any difference, because I'm not sure there's any grade rating to any nuts, but I could be wrong. Anyway, we fitted the nuts, we fitted the bolts, fitted the nuts, and it allows you to use a slightly more torque. And Bruce worked out from the density of the aluminium and the place on the cylinder head, the heat. Now obviously the front of the cylinder head runs much cooler because it's in the airflow. The back of the head obviously runs hotter. The centre of the head, because it's much thicker than the density of the aluminium, that runs hotter still. So anyway, that means that the torque at the front of the cylinder head is far more than the back of the cylinder head. Initially with the R-grade bolts, I think I was running about £2 on the 4 centre bolts in the valve covers. Now I run considerably more, because as the cylinder block expands, the stainless studs expand, which means you can start with more torque when it's cold. When they're hot, the torque all comes to the same figure because of the thickness, the density, and the heat distribution through the cylinder head. Anyway, that's about as good as I can explain that while we sat up bike. Needless to say though, the gasket don't blow, it don't leak oil. It's worked on this bike. I'm sure people will have different opinions, but I took advice off Bruce and it's worked for me. The gaskets are Otto gaskets, they're made in Germany. They're a bit expensive, like, not too bad from club, and that seems to solve the problem. Although when they're cold you have to be just a little bit gentle with them while you get a bit of heat into the cylinder head and the torque comes up, so, and then once they're warm you're away, there's not a problem. And as for them getting red hot on back cylinders, everybody will tell you they seize up and everything. This has never seized up. Basically, when I did the cylinders, I owned the back cylinders to, I think it were 5 thou, and the front to 4 thou clearance, which just gives them a little bit more clearance on rear cylinders to help cope with a bit extra heat. So anyway, that's how I got around my problem. Never seized up or anything. This bike was found under an house, not in a cellar, actually under the floorboards, with a collection of other bikes. There was some really nice stuff come out from under this house, but anyway, this is what bike I ended up with. I'll put a picture in it so you can have a look at what state it was, and if you look in the background of the picture you'll actually see there were a row of bikes behind it. Anyway, on getting it home, it were covered in like black tar, and it wouldn't wash off with petrol or paraffin, so a lot of it I ended up scraping off with a knife. But apparently the fella who used to own them used to walk in and chuck a bucket of engine oil straight over all these bikes, and you know, I mean, protection, I mean, I didn't even weld a patch in mudguards on this bike. Everything was really good, bar for anything what was rubber or plastic or out like that. Well, it won't be plastic in them days, but equivalent. It had just dissolved in the spirit from the oil. The wiring loom was just copper hung down, the rubber had completely gone off it. The seat was missing off it, and the exhaust system was non-existent. It got a pair of silencers off ARIEL. Anyway, I got it home, got it stripped, got the engine in bits, and the engine, every bearing in it was as new. There were no wear on anything whatsoever. The cranks were all standard, never been ground or anything like that. One white metal bearing on the front right hand side, it had a piece of the white metal had come off the backing, so I put a new bearing in that side and set it up under my big mill and line bored the crankcases again, and that was fine. That took care at the bottom end. Obviously re-shelled it. Makes you wonder if somebody's only just got out of bed. Anyway, that was all I had to do at the bottom of the engine. The cylinders were on plus 20s and it had got I think 3 broken piston rings, but no wear on the bores. They were exactly the same at the top and the bottom, and it makes me think maybe at some time it had a short engine in it, because the bottom of the engine were really good and the cylinder head were abysmal. It were in a right state. We basically had to recut the valve seats, that sort of thing, face it. Anyway, that was all basically I did it, and it was not major. Got it back together, and that's how it's been since, other than me take it head off once more to reseal it with the auto gaskets and the new stainless studs. Pretty much rest it bike as it was. I did go on to fit a Margo oil pump and a filter. I'm actually running a filter under the engine, between the gearbox and the frame at the rear, and a Margo pump. Hence I've got, you know, that's what I've got it set at, about 50-60 pound when it's warm, and it drops down to about 10, so that's 60 pound when it's running, and 10 pound when it's ticking over. The engine sprocket, I was speaking to Bruce Longsman, and he advised me to put 3 extra teeth on the engine sprocket, which makes the bike run. It gives me ability to cruise it a lot faster. I was saying about the bigger engine sprocket. Makes it for much more relaxed when you're cruising. That's got rid of him anyway. Absolutely lovely bike to ride. If you ever get a chance to have a go on one, jump on it and have a go. The motor's so flexible. I think the sales bump at the time said 10 to 100 in one gear, and on the standard gearing, make no mistake, that certainly, well, the 10 mile an hour I can vouch for, the 100 mile an hour not. I think fastest I've ever been on this bike is 80 mile an hour. I don't think I need it to do 100 anymore. But like I was saying, if you get a chance to have a go, the most flexible thing you've ever driven. It's a lovely bike for out little back range, because once you get it in top gear, you never have to bother, it just pulls effortlessly. Quite low geared in first still, but I think everybody in the day put these things on sidecars because they were so torquey. Suspension's not too bad for its day, I suppose. The Amnesty links, which is on the back, are quite an unusual setup. They're called Amnesty after the name of the bloke who invented them. Basically it moves in a slight arc, and the arc is similar to the, or same as, the sprocket, so it's more or less constant chain tension. Seems to work alright. Apparently once it's got some play in, it's absolutely terrible. Apparently they get a real bad shimmy on back end, but this one's alright. I made all new pins, bushes, all that sort of stuff, so it hasn't done enough miles for it to be worn out as yet. Everything on this bike, apart from the stainless nuts and bolts which I made myself, is original. All the levers, switch gear were original, the mirror obviously wasn't original, clock were original, basically everything like that were on it and complete, and everything worked, even the dynamo worked. It's still got the points what were in it, what I found with it, you know, and the distributor cap and such things as that. it was just a really nice, you know, model. Everything on it was what as is. Obviously I had to have it re-chromed and that sort of thing. I mean, believe it or not, the stanchions are still the original stanchions in the fork leg. They weren't rotten. They were smooth enough, wet fork seal runs, because at this time they didn't even chrome plate them. They were just bare steel, but they're perfectly alright. I mean, they're in it now and they don't leak oil or out like that, so I think only thing I did repair on it was red dot ammeter. I can't remember why I repaired it, but it didn't work, so anyway I repaired it. It was something to note really, but it would have had a chrome petrol tank in its day. That's why it's painted with a silver, to mimic the chrome. They're unfortunately, they want that much money to do chrome plating now, and they end up grinding half a tank away, or you know, to get down to a good metal surface. I've since found out that Derbyshire platers will actually copper them up and then plate them, but it's done now, so a little lay-by up road. I'll just stop in there and we'll have a little look round Old Lass, see if I can point out to you what I haven't mentioned. Yeah, I think this place will do, won't it? Right, let's see what I can tell you about it. This is the honesty link. As you can see, this stirrup travels on this pivot, which means it actually travels in an arc to keep the chain tension tight. Big pin through the middle, pins in here, all bushed, all kept greased up. Distributor, solid carburetor. Seems to work fantastic on this. This is what they call a bi-starter. It's basically cold start, and it acts like a small carburetor on top. Pull it right out to start it. Once it's running, push it in halfway, a few miles down the road you can knock it off. I think that's pretty much all I can tell you about this side of it. This model, the manifolds was cast on the Mark 1s on the cylinder head. That's what causes a lot of the problem. Because the heat can't get away, it transfers back into the cylinder head. The 4Gs, it was a cast iron top end, and this part bolted on, so you could take it off and it got an insulating washer in there, so the heat didn't transfer back into the head. The Mark 1 with this. The Mark 2's got the 4 pipes, and these parts bolt on. It's to get the heat away from the cylinder head so it didn't cause as much trouble. The Mark 2's, I believe the early ones had the Solex, and the later ones had an SU carburetor. I mean, this is the ignition key. What a place to put an ignition key. Big valance mudguards. Suppose that kept out muck at bay in the day. What we got on this side? Yeah, you've got 2 connecting gears onto spring shock absorber, clutch. That's about it. Battery was an unusual battery. I believe these batteries, it was a GU something or other, were actually a lot bigger than all else in the day, because everybody were running coil ignition. And dynamo, I believe, were an Austin 7 type dynamo. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think that's correct. Badges were original, never did out with them. The enamel's a bit here and there, but these screws would normally be soldered over to the top. They had a blob of solder on, so they couldn't fall off or whatever you wouldn't you. Right, we'll move on a bit further. Oh, unusual petrol cap. Foot handles, you undo that, turn it, take it out, then twist it, tighten the knob. If you over tighten it, sometimes you can't get it off again. Right, we'll go on a bit further. I don't think there's pretty much else I can tell you about it. Our pressure gauge in tank, obviously. I think they stopped using oil pressure gauges for Mark II. I think with these things they're a bit I think they had a problem with a weak bottom end. Yep. I think it'd be quite the oil galleries in the crank are very small. I think they're something like 3/16 of an inch. So consequently, if you don't keep the oil clean in them, they start to block the galleries up. And then you get a nip up on a con rod, and it chucks the rod through the front of the case. I think there's loads of these about. What's that crankcase is repaired, because they've had a rod through front of cases. This one's still got original rods in. I think the club does a lot heavier duty con rod, and I think you can get them changed on an exchange basis. I mean, you pay and they take your old rods back, and I think the reason they take old rods back is so nobody can refit them in an engine, and you end up destroying another engine. Now the 4G, they didn't have shells, they were white metal. By the time they got to this model they were using shells, but I believe you can still fit these rods in earlier engine, the 4G. I mean, the very first one was a 600cc overhead cam model. Because Matulus actually brought out a V4 called the Silver Hawk, and that was a competitor to, that's a V4 shaft driven overhead cam. Quite a very rare and unusual bike is that. I think they were always renowned for being a little bit thirsty, these as well. Well, this bike used to run rich, and they're quite an unusual carb, is Solex. Well, they are to me anyway. I'm just used to Amels. To weaken the mixture is not exactly always the thing. You end up juggling the mixture between the air correction jet and the main jet. If you were to change the main jet without changing the air correction jet, you end up altering the mixture at the other end as well. So if you alter the main jet, you need to alter the air correction jet. Well, I messed about with it, and I set about it, and I kept making jets and altering them until I got what I wanted. Now, it just runs a tad on rich side. I didn't want to run it on the weak side, because obviously it runs hot enough as it is. I mean, today's ideal day for these, you know, not hot, cool breeze, you can run them along and they don't get red hot. This one does smoke a little bit, and I think it's down to the Morgo pump. If you're on a red hot day, you stop at a set of traffic lights, it'll smoke a little bit on right hand bank. By the time you've set off and get through traffic lights, it stops smoking. And I think it's because it's got the Morgo pump on, and when it's red hot she's bypassing the oil, and the bypass is right again the web, the throw on number 1 cylinder, and I think it just throws a bit of oil up number 1 cylinder and causes it to smoke, and then once you set off it hasn't time to get upside that cylinder, so it stops smoking. I've had a couple of cups of tea and get off on my way home. Like I say, I'm nearly home again, so see you on the next video.